Okay, let's unpack this. We are doing a deep dive today into someone really vital, but honestly, often misunderstood in literature, Franz Kafka.
Yeah, when people hear Kafka, often the first picture that pops into their head is this sort of caricature, right? A
Hmm.
morbid, always depressed guy from ages ago writing these really bleak, hard-to-get stories.
Exactly, that's the common idea.
Uh-huh.
And it really, really simplifies his genius, I think. We're
Yeah.
basically here to argue that Kafka was, well, almost a visionary. He kind of distilled the core anxieties of modern life, like a whole century before we were living them.
Uh-huh. He really mapped out that feeling of crippling social anxiety, and maybe even more importantly, the deep psychological stuff that comes from, expectations, daddy issues, basically.
And what's amazing is how the metamorphosis, this big one, still feels so relatable. The main guy, Gregor Samsa, wakes up as this giant bug.
Yeah, a horrible vermin.
Right. But his first thought isn't, oh my God, what's happening to me?
It's entirely practical. It's how am I going to get to work like this?
Exactly. The story kicks off with this huge tragedy, showing that his job, his ability to earn money, was somehow more important, even to him, than his own body, his own self.
And that disconnect, putting output before just being, that's why Kafka hits so hard today. So our mission here is to walk you through his life, the pressures, the details, to really get why his writing feels almost essential for navigating, well, today. Modern work, modern life.
Okay, so to get Kafka, you have to start where his own conflicts began. This massive weight of expectation. Franz Kafka, by all accounts, was naturally shy, quiet, soft-spoken, a sensitive kid who just wanted to read books, sort of the classic little man from the start.
And then you have his father, Hermann Kafka, who was the complete opposite. Self-made businessman, real archetype of that assertive masculinity, big guy, strong, loud. He basically demanded his son mirror his success, his dominance.
And Hermann looks at Franz, this quiet reader, and just sees failure, essentially. That distance, that disappointment you could feel, it led young Kafka to really internalize this deep feeling of not being enough.
Mm-hmm. And he developed this constant need for validation, for approval, that really ended up steering a lot of his life choices. It was like this hunger that could never quite be filled.
That whole environment, though, it's kind of the fire where his artistic side was forged. He pushed all that pressure into becoming super intelligent, got into the really prestigious Charles University in Prague, and he first started studying chemistry, actually.
Right. But then comes the big moment, the big compromise. Herman just dismisses chemistry, calls it a useless subject.
Yeah.
The demand was clear. Switch to law, become a lawyer, help with the family business, and, in Herman's view, be a man finally.
And Kafka, driven by that need for his dad's approval,
Yeah.
he did it. He switched.
He switched to law
Yeah.
and basically spent his working life in these bureaucratic jobs he hated. Routine, soul-crushing, just dry.
Yeah, the sources really show sacrificing your dreams for someone else's approval, it doesn't really spark joy, does it? But what did he do with that unhappiness? He needed an escape. And that brings us to his writing, his love life, and, well, the cost of commitment.
So he kept the 9-to-5 job. And in a way that feels very modern, he lived with his parents, like well into adulthood. Writing became his lifeline, his coping mechanism late at night, trying to block out all the noise in his head, internal and external.
And this routine, this pressure, led to this incredible burst of creativity. In 1912, something just clicked. He sits down and, almost in a trance, writes the entire story of the metamorphosis. Just like that, one night, bang, his masterpiece.
And it really says something about how powerful that story is, that over 100 years later, it's still one of the most read, most talked about pieces of literature. You look online, Goodreads, whatever, millions of people engaging with it.
It's huge.
But while the writing was flowing, his personal life, well, it was pretty damaged by his past.
That shadow of his father, that feeling of being unworthy, it seems like it really messed up his ability to have healthy relationships. He tried, he got engaged.
Twice, with the same woman, Felice Bauer. Tumultuous doesn't even cover it. Engaged, broke it off, engaged again, and then finally he just sort of ghosts her, isolates himself.
He was terrified of commitment.
It seems like it. He saw marriage as a kind of prison, maybe, and fundamentally felt she wasn't worthy of love, of that kind of stability.
There's that really jarring quote we found where he wrote, "Sex is the punishment for being together."
Yeah. Oof. That one line just shows how deep the anxiety went, how twisted his view of connection and intimacy became because of all that pressure and self-doubt.
Which leads us into the third part of his story, The final years, the illness, and this just incredible twist around his literary legacy. It almost didn't happen.
Right. So at 34, Kafka gets diagnosed with tuberculosis. He becomes progressively sicker, more fragile, weaker, his body starting to fail him, maybe mirroring how his spirit always felt kind of diminished.
But in that darkness, there was a bit of light. He met Dora Demid. The sources describe her as just actual sunshine in human form. Really calm, caring, loving. She was with him at the end, taking care of him.
A genuinely supportive presence, yeah. But his final struggle was awful. The TB eventually got to his throat, his larynx. Swallowing became agony.
So he couldn't eat.
Couldn't eat, couldn't drink without excruciating pain. He basically starved to death. Passed away in 1924, only 40 years old.
And throughout his adult life, we know about the insomnia, writing like mad until sunrise, but also being incredibly self-critical.
Oh, brutally so. Always abandoning stories, refusing to publish things he'd finished because he thought they weren't good enough. Just crippled by insecurity about his work.
And tragically, his very last piece of writing wasn't a story. It was a letter called A Hunger Artist. But it was really him begging his doctors, don't force feed me. He preferred starving to the pain of living, or maybe the pain of eating.
And then comes the big one, the huge plot twist that basically defines his entire legacy. On his deathbed, Kafka tells his best friend, Max Brod, his final instruction.
What was it?
Burn everything, all of it. Unpublished novels, diaries, letters, every scrap of paper he'd ever written on.
He wanted it all gone, wiped out.
Exactly, total erasure. But Max Brod, he didn't do it. He completely ignored Kafka's dying wish. Brod believed Kafka was just too important, too brilliant to let his work disappear into ashes. So instead, he published it. The Trial, The Castle, America, all the stuff we study now.
So Kafka is a literary legend only because his best friend betrayed his final request.
It raises a massive question, doesn't it, about loyalty versus legacy. Was Brod betraying his friend, or was it the ultimate act of love, knowing Kafka's genius better than Kafka did himself, especially given his self-loathing about his writing?
That complexity is exactly why he's still so fascinating. And to really get why Brod saving that work matters, we need to circle back to the core message, especially in the Metamorphosis. The bug.
Let's talk about the bug again.
Right.
It's not literally about turning into an insect. It's a metaphor, a really powerful one.
For what?
For anything catastrophic that happens to a person completely out of their control, that strips away their independence, their usefulness. Think severe mental illness, a life-changing injury, maybe even economic collapse, making your skills worthless.
Okay, something that takes away your ability to function normally in society.
Exactly. And the story then asks the really brutal question, how does the family react when that happens? Remember, Gregor was the only one earning money.
Right. So at first, they're concerned, maybe a bit freaked out.
Initially, yes, a flicker of concern. But as soon as it's clear he can't pay the bills anymore, the moment he stops being useful, the whole dynamic shifts.
They start to resent him.
Totally. They grow distant, frustrated. They stop seeing him as Gregor, their son, their brother who's suffering. He just becomes this burden, a financial drain, an embarrassment. It goes from sympathy to basically disgust.
Until they start wishing he'd just disappear.
Precisely. They literally start wishing he would die or just vanish so their lives could go back to normal.
Wow. That's harsh.
It's Kafka's harshest truth laid bare. The second you stop being useful, the moment you stop producing value in a way society recognizes, people, maybe even those closest to you, can start treating you like you barely exist. Your value plummets.
Which brings us right to the heart of why we're doing this deep dive. Why does Kafka, this guy from over a century ago, feel like, as you put it, the spiritual older brother of Gen Z, or just modern life in general? The connections are uncanny.
They really are. The first, maybe the biggest one, is that core modern dilemma. Productivity equals self-worth.
Okay, explain that.
Well, just look around. Think about online culture. It's saturated with productivity hacks, optimized routines, hustle culture, David Goggins edits, Joe Rogan talking about discipline.
Right, the constant push to do more, be more efficient.
Exactly. And we tie our own sense of value, our emotional state, to how much we got done that day. Did I tick all the boxes? Was I productive? Kafka lived this. He worked in that soul-crushing bureaucracy where human worth is measured by output.
So when you feel that guilt or shame because you didn't clear your inbox or finish your to-do list, that's a Kafkaesque feeling.
Absolutely. His big themes, the individual crushed by these faceless, uncaring systems, like the absurd legal battles in the trial that go nowhere, They perfectly mirror that anxiety of constant performance reviews, hitting KPIs, the feeling you're always behind, never quite enough.
Okay, that connection is clear. What's the second one?
The second big one is alienation, feeling like a total outsider. This wasn't just a theme in his books, it was his life.
How so?
Think about his identity. He was a German speaker living in Prague, which was mostly Czech-speaking, so language barrier, cultural difference right there. The Czech majority didn't fully accept him.
Yeah.
But the German-speaking community often distanced themselves too because he was Jewish. And then even within the Jewish community, his family wasn't super religious, so he didn't quite fit in there either. He was stuck in the margins everywhere, accepted fully nowhere.
Triple outsider.
Yeah. And that deep, profound sense of not belonging, of being disconnected, isn't that incredibly relevant today? Even with the internet connecting everyone globally, people report feeling more alone than ever.
You hear stories, right? People forming intense bonds with AI chatbots. There was that news story about the guy who wanted to marry ChatGPT or something.
Exactly. It points to this deep loneliness, this search for connection that often feels unfulfilled. Kafka's outsider experience speaks directly to that modern existential loneliness.
Okay, productivity, alienation. What's the third link?
The third one goes right back to the beginning, family pressure and daddy issues. That constant weight of parental expectation.
We talked about Herman.
Right. Herman Kafka relentlessly criticized Franz, dismissed his writing, his passions, made him feel weak, inadequate because he wasn't fitting the mold.
And that experience feeling like you're never good enough for a demanding parent, that you're failing because you chose a different path.
It's still a massive source of generational friction and trauma today across so many cultures. That feeling that your life choices, whether it's your career, your lifestyle, whatever, are constantly being judged by some authority figure who thinks you should be different.
Chemistry versus law, writ large across generations. Kafka really did feel like a prophet of modern anxiety.
Absolutely. So when we wrap up this deep dive, what Kafka really shows us is how easily we can slip into valuing usefulness over actual humanity. How external pressures from family, from work, from society can just grind down our sense of self, leaving us feeling alienated and judged.
So the final thought for you listening to this, think about the paradox here. We talked about the intense pressure Kafka was under, the secrecy, the fact he wanted his work destroyed. What if he hadn't been in that pressure cooker? If his dad had been supportive, if he hadn't felt so alienated?
Would he have written those things with that same raw honesty, that same insight into suffering and absurdity that makes him resonate so much today?
Maybe the very conditions that tortured him were necessary for the art he created. Something to think about. Go explore the sources, dig deeper into his life and work, and see what that paradox brings up for you.